Good morning, DawgNation. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Hello to you. Thanks for being with us. We're going to have a fun show today. Later on, we're going to have a guy on the program who's written a very interesting book that tells kind of a behind-the-scenes story about his own journey through Georgia football. I think you're going to really like this. It's really inspiring in so many ways. That's going to be fun. And former Georgia linebacker Rennie Curran also going to be on the program today as well. So we're busy on the guest front here today when it comes to DawgNation Daily. And I want to begin the show with some of the stuff that Kirby Smart has recently said about the upgrade in Georgia's schedule and some of the things the national media has said about that as well. And there's some recruiting news on the program too, so we're fully loaded and glad you're with us. As DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Later on, I'm going to tell you about two really fun guests we're going to have on today's program, and I'm going to remind you about a big opportunity that you're going to want to be a part of. Before we get to that, though, I think the most interesting story around Georgia football over the last few days has been this continued pursuit of an upgrade in non-conference scheduling. And there's really no other way to say it than that. Georgia has not just been dabbling its toe in the waters of let's play some tougher non-conference games. What Georgia has really done is completely reimagined what a college football schedule could look like. And for me personally, and I've never, shied away from the fact that I'm a fan of the Georgia Bulldogs, as a fan, it fills me with a sense of pride to think that Georgia is leading the way on this. However, there are 2 points in addition to that I will admit privately I also think. Sometimes I wonder strategically if this is going to work out as well as maybe some think it should and will, and that doesn't change the fact that I still like the games that Georgia's being played. I just am a little bit suspicious of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee's true desire to reward the toughest and best schedules. The last 5 years of history of the College Football Playoff don't necessarily suggest that. However, what Georgia's doing, I think, is still the right thing to do. But even beyond that, the other thing that kind of jumps out to me is, with Kirby Smart being as aggressive as he has been in pursuing these games, the one that was just added with Oklahoma, the Florida States, the Clemsons, the Texas, Notre Dame, which is coming in here this season, I guess also an example of that as well. When you look at all these games that Georgia's going to play, I just hope that Georgia gets the national credit it should get for when the new era gets here. I hope the history books let it be known that it was Georgia who put us on this path. It was Kirby Smart individually who set us down this course of better non-conference schedules. And one day when you're talking to your grandkids 100 years from now, you can say, back in my day, there were big-time college football programs who played the UT Chattanoogas and the McNeese States and the Troys and whomever else you want to mention. I hope that's a real foreign concept to the next generation, the folks too young to even know anything right now. I hope that's a foreign concept to them in the future about college football. And if that does indeed happen, it certainly seems that Kirby Smart has done his part to push us towards that direction. And I kind of hope he gets credit for that. Now, ultimately, the credit doesn't mean anything. You can't trade that for anything of real, actual, tangible value. But it just sort of seems right, doesn't it? That Kirby Smart would be recognized for what he's done, not just to upgrade Georgia's schedules, but maybe eventually upgrading all of the major programs' schedules in college football. That Kirby Smart, in a roundabout way, is kind of a trailblazer on this. Well, if you agree with me on that, there is good news today. Some in the national media truly are noticing what Kirby Smart has done. The latest iteration of this, the addition of Oklahoma in Norman in 2023, back in Athens in 2031, and on the ESPN program Pardon the Interruption, which has been on for a million years, and a show that I still kind of like, although I probably don't watch it nearly as much as I used to. I'll tell you a quick story. I was sitting here in our DawgNation World Headquarters studios last night. I was doing a little bit of work, and we got some TVs on, like a lot of the sort of sports-themed businesses probably do. And I looked up on one of the monitors, and sure enough, there were Wilbon and Kornheiser, these two faces that have debated a million topics over the years, and they're actually talking about Kirby Smart. Now, if you watch the show, or for really any of these ESPN shows, the Stephen A. Smith stuff or the Skip Bayless stuff on Fox, you know that college football is not a topic they discuss every day. It's the NBA ad nauseum for whatever reason, but it's not college football probably as much as you might think or you might want it to be. Well, they were talking about Kirby Smart and Georgia yesterday on Pardon the Interruption, and in the middle of the late spring heading towards summer, that's probably kind of a neat thing, and they were crediting Smart and Georgia for the scheduling work that is done. I thought this was kind of cool. Here's Tony Kornheiser on the subject of Georgia playing the tougher games.
I don't know if it's wise. I think it's a very, very good move. They want three powerful non-conference opponents. In 2015, before Smart got there, they had Louisiana Monroe, Southern, and Georgia Southern. So they had the Southerns completely covered. Here's, I think, the long-range thinking. I think that the college playoff will eventually go to 8, and then you're going to have to include some non-conference winners, right? And so you look at how do you choose them, and maybe you look at how basketball chooses them, that they look at strength of schedule. And so Kirby Smart would be positioning a really great program like Georgia into a 2-loss-and-in situation, right? That's got to be his thinking.
I think Kornheiser's right about that. That's also the scenario that I hope is true. I'm in favor of an 18 playoff, and I'm in favor of that 18 playoff rewarding what I guess would be at least 3 non-conference champions in a situation like that, rewarding the teams who are truly the best. And I think one of the best ways to prove you're one of the best teams in college football is to play the best overall schedule. I mean, let's face it, we all know the really disappointing feeling it was after the 2018 season when I think many of us felt like there was an argument to be made that Georgia was one of the 4 best teams in the country, and yet it wasn't a winning argument because most people around the country didn't want to hear it. They chose to ignore Georgia in favor of teams like Oklahoma and Notre Dame that had better records. That's a tired debate now, but one of the things that Kornheiser seems to be saying there is, in future debates like that, if you're playing the kinds of schedules that Georgia's going to be playing in addition to the SEC schedule, boy, it's going to be a lot harder to leave out UGA, and it's kind of nice to hear a talking head on ESPN say that. Now, his partner in these debates is Michael Wilbon, and Wilbon reflected on, pardon the interruption yesterday, a very similar line of thought. Here is Wilbon on UGA.
The key here is you can sustain 2 losses, and there will regularly be, particularly from the SEC. Because let's face it, their conference schedule is so difficult.
Yeah.
They always get the benefit of the doubt with whoever's in that room. And so now you say, okay, they got 2 losses, so what? They played Oklahoma. They played,
Texas,
UCLA.
Notre
They
Dame.
played Texas.
Yeah.
So, and home, not neutrals. Not we play at the Mercedes-Benz
not
Atlanta
Jerry
Stadium.
World. No.
You play on campus.
Yeah.
You play in Austin.
I agree.
You play in Norman.
There's another part to this, Mike.
It should work.
First of all, it's kind of funny to hear these two talking over each other. It sounds like me hosting Before the Hedges with Jeff, talking over him the entire time. It's kind of funny to hear that. But as I said before, the ultimate national attention that Georgia gets here probably doesn't mean a whole lot, but I still like it because what you're hearing there from both those guys is pretty well reflective of the way that I feel and also of the way I think many of you feel about this, that in the future, I think tougher schedules are going to matter more than ever before, and the fact that Georgia's going to be playing the toughest of those schedules is overall kind of a cool thing, and it seems like from time to time, sometimes the SEC, not UGA individually, but the SEC collectively kind of gets a little bit poked at from some of these big city guys outside the Southeast. Sometimes they want to be skeptical of the SEC because they get tired of SEC dominance, but you hear there a good bit of acknowledgement on the part of Wilbon, which in and of itself is not a bad thing. Now, let me kind of keep the same theme of the conversation going here for a moment because Kirby Smart was also talking about these schedules himself. He was on WJOX yesterday, which is a big sports radio station out of Alabama. That region's tradition, Celebrity Pro-Am was yesterday. For those of you who like golf, it's the PGA Tour Champions event that takes place in Alabama every year, and the big event on Wednesday is always highly attended by a lot of coaches and college football-type personalities. Kirby Smart is typically there. He was there again yesterday. He sat down for a radio interview on WJOX, and the subject of the recently scheduled Oklahoma series was also the topic there. And the question that came up was, and this is a point of curiosity for not just folks outside the bubble of DawgNation, to a certain extent within the bubble of DawgNation too, of, well, it's good that you're playing Oklahoma, but how come they're not coming to Athens until 2031? And I thought Kirby Smart had a really good answer to that question. Here's what Kirby Smart said.
Here's the problem. If you don't do that, you won't have one of those games. So for us, 2023, we just got Oklahoma. We couldn't find anybody in the country that didn't have a game in 2023. And you think, well, that's 4 years out. That's like right now because the scheduling is all done. You see Alabama's doing the same thing. Clemson's doing the same thing. If you don't get your games further out, you won't have games.
I get that, but 2031 is a long time.
Right, but there's no opening between there and there. We had a weird gap. We had 2023, and then everything was booked. So the only option was 2031. But I agree, it's a long way out. But you can't not do it that way because they go out and get other teams. For the only option we have 2023 would have been to play a team we could have paid and come in. And then I'd be sitting here going, well, why are you playing all these cupcakes? You know what I mean? So for us, we want to go play the best. We think it's going to help with the college football playoff because the strength of schedule is always going to be a major factor, and we want that.
I mean, listen, I think the point that Smart's making there is inarguable. Obviously, we'd love to play all these games this upcoming year if possible, but the fact of the matter is it's not possible because of the convoluted nature of the scheduling. And as Smart says, the kinds of scheduling work other programs are doing is more proof of that as it stands right now, Smart and Georgia are literally doing the best that they can. However, there's one more small clip I want to play from Smart. And ultimately, I think this is the bottom line of this entire discussion, that it may be good for the playoffs to have the best overall schedule, and it may help with recruiting and things like that. But ultimately, the idea in mind here is the biggest programs ought to be one playing in the biggest games. And I thought Smart said that perfectly yesterday.
We've said, you know what, let's go out and play them. It helps recruiting, helps national stage. You want to be in the game at 8 o'clock on Saturday night, playing Notre Dame. That's what you want.
Once again, that's WJOX there in Alabama. Pretty good conversation with Kirby Smart yesterday, and that final line is the one that sums it all up for me. It's nice that Wilbon and Kornheiser on PTI have noticed the tougher Georgia scheduling, and strategically it may indeed work out to an advantage when it comes to a college football playoff conversation. But ultimately, the value of these games is the games themselves. I like Kirby Smart's phrasing there. 8 o'clock on a Saturday night, we can all get our eyes closed and have a vision of what that game looks like. We like settling in front of the TV on our couches and watching these biggest college football games each and every week. And for those of us who are Georgia fans, there's a sense of pride in thinking that Georgia's one of the teams that belongs in games like that. And Kirby Smart seems to have just ensured the Dogs will be in those kinds of games for many years to come. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Hello to you, and thanks for being with us. Live on video today, 10 a.m., DawgNation Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. And we're available as a podcast pretty much wherever you find them, the Apple Podcast Player, the Google Podcast Player, and the world-famous DawgNation.com. Now, speaking of DawgNation.com, I want you to go to DawgNation.com. Find the link there for our DawgNation Days of Summer. The first big event for that this summer comes up on Thursday, June 13th. When you go click in that link at DawgNation.com for DawgNation Days of Summer, you're going to find a spot to register for your chance to win a VIP stay at Callaway Resort and Gardens with us, the team from DawgNation, on Thursday, June 13th. So please register for that while you have a chance. Also, go ahead and book your rooms. I know a lot of them have been being booked very fast. My understanding is we still have some spots left for our VIP event that night before the big event at 6 p.m. We have a special VIP opportunity that night an hour early, but you got to be one of the first 20 rooms booked, and those rooms, at least in terms of the VIP opportunity, are not going to last forever. So get in and get involved and be a part of all of that. DawgNation.com, the place to go for that. And if you're concerned about winning the trip, I understand you are, please don't miss out on your chance to book a room, because once the VIP stuff is gone, we can't add more to that for space issues, for the cost of attendance type issues. We can't add more to the VIP list once it's full. If you win the trip and you've already booked a room, we'll simply comp that trip for you and we'll get you all taken care of. But we can't add to the VIP list once the list is completely locked down and full. So get in, get booked, and be a part of that. DawgNation.com, the place to go to find out more about DawgNation Days of Summer. And by the way, we also have a few spaces reserved for a couple golf foursomes on Friday. For those of you who want to extend your stay a little bit, hang out with us on Friday. Go to DawgNation.com on that as well. There's a place to kind of get in on there and find out if you want to be a part of some golf. Myself, Jeff Sintel, maybe some other DawgNation folks. Check in on that, because we're there to have a good time and we're going to have fun. And part of that includes golf for many of us. So check in on that at DawgNation.com. Hope to see you at Callaway Resort and Gardens on June 13th for DawgNation Days of Summer, and then in August at Brasstown Valley Resort and Spa as well. All right, let's go around the doghouse here today. It's presented by Online Trading Academy, and I want to go back to some news that we heard yesterday. Jeff Sintel wrote about this at DawgNation.com. One of the top recruiting targets on Georgia's board, the four-star offensive tackle Tate Ratledge, has made an announcement. He put this out on Twitter. If you're on video, you get a chance to see this. He's down to a final two, he says, of Georgia and Tennessee, and on Monday morning, he's going to make his decision. Now, if you listen to Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger yesterday, you heard a little bit of audio from Ratledge that maybe gives us a bit of insight into kind of how this decision is going to play out. First and foremost, he's going to get a lot of attention right now this weekend heading towards Monday, because he's a big target for the Dogs and a big target for the Vols. But that level of attention is not necessarily something that Ratledge is necessarily all that comfortable with. In fact, here's what he said about that in the past.
I'm not a big, put myself out there I'm going to get all this media attention and stuff like that. So I might just do it simple thing on Twitter or something like that.
If you had to decide tomorrow, if tomorrow was National Signing Day, do you know?
I do not. I have no clue right now.
Do you know which hats would be on the table, I guess, a little bit? Do you know who would be in it?
If I had to say right now, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, Auburn, and Florida.
So that's what he said then. Obviously, now we've whittled that down to just a final two. And when Ratledge spoke to Jeff Sintel not all that long ago, he kind of talked about that level of comfort that he has with both Georgia and Tennessee. And it's easy to understand why they ended up being his final two. Here's what he said about that.
Which one of those schools do you have the fewest questions about by now?
Georgia and Tennessee. I've been there the most, and I've built great relationships with Coach Frank, Coach Pittman. Every time I go down there, it's not tour of everything. It's getting closer with the coaches and building those relationships. I like Athens. I feel like I'd be happy there if I wasn't playing football. I could live there. And Coach Pittman, he's probably the coach that I've came closest with over my time being recruited.
So listen, I think that makes you feel really good if you're a Georgia fan. It's also worth pointing, as Jeff has written at DawgNation.com. Tate Ratledge's dad also has that Power T sticker in the back of his truck. So this is a family that's got some fan connection to Tennessee, but obviously a connection with Sam Pittman, and that's one of the reasons why Georgia fans, while a little cautious here, will feel optimistic a little bit heading towards Monday when Tate Ratledge ultimately makes his choice between the Dogs and the Vols. Cannot wait to see how that unfolds. It's Around the Doghouse here on DawgNation Daily. It's brought to you by Online Trading Academy. Investing is one of the most important things for any person in their life, and when you're getting started in that, one of the best decisions is to make the decision to invest in yourself. That means learning how to make money in the markets. I'm talking about across a variety of trading styles and a spectrum of asset classes. That's one of the things that Online Trading Academy gives you a chance to do, both in the classroom and online. You will truly learn how to make money in the markets. That means you want to check out their website right now. That's tradingacademy.com/Atlanta. Once again, tradingacademy.com/Atlanta. It's Online Trading Academy. All right, later on, there is a former UGA player who's written a fascinating book. He's going to tell us more about his story then and there, and I think you're going to really like that. But first, also another former Georgia player and a good friend of us here at Dog Nation who just celebrated a terrific honor. It's the former linebacker, Rennie Curran. It's great to have him on Dog Nation Daily, and great to have you with us as well. All right, we'll get Rennie Curran here coming up in just a moment as we talk a little football with him. And as I said before, we also are going to later on talk to Candler Cook. Candler has written a book called From Underdog to Bulldog, where he tells the story of how he went from being a high school football player that simply dreamed of playing at Georgia to working his way up to a walk-on, and after being rejected over and over again, finally got into a Georgia uniform and then into a Georgia game. It's almost like a real-life Rudy story for those of you who are familiar with the movie about the former Notre Dame player, Rudy Rudiger. This is kind of Georgia's own version of that. Candler does a great job of telling his story, and we're going to give him a chance to do that on Dog Nation Daily a little bit later on. I think you're going to really like that. And we're going to catch up here with Rennie Curran in just a bit, too. One of the reasons why I want to have Rennie on the program is because with this fantastic crop of impressive freshman linebackers on hand for Georgia, there are going to be some comparisons being made to those guys and the great linebackers of Georgia's past. And, obviously sometimes Roquan Smith's a name that comes up there in that regard. And then in other respects, it's a guy like Rennie Curran, who was a tackling machine for Georgia just a few years ago, and a guy that in some respects the Nakobe Deans and the Tresman Marshalls and the Ryan Trouble Davis, in some respects, those are players that kind of remind you of what a guy like Rennie Curran was doing in the Georgia uniform. So we'll look forward to talking to Rennie Curran about that coming up in just a moment. I'm also going to have some fun at the Florida Gators expense here, too. That's become kind of a daily habit for us on Dog Nation Daily. So we'll kind of keep that going. We are efforting to catch up with Rennie right now. So while we're doing that, let me pop up the comment section here. We'll take a few of your comments. We'll do our R.S. Andrews School Down, of course, later on in the program today. But let me take a moment to do this right now, and we'll kind of get into all this with you here on Dog Nation Daily here today. On the Facebook comment section, first off, we'll kind of get rolling with that just for a bit. Certainly a lot of folks getting excited about the Dog Nation Days of Summer. By the way, if you go to the Facebook comment section, even if you're watching on YouTube right now or Twitter or one of the other video feeds, if you want to click over to Facebook just for a moment, for those of you who have access to that, you can find out more about those Dog Nation Days of Summer. We'll also take a lot of your comments, get a lot of reaction, but we do have Rennie Curran ready to roll now. So I know you want to hear from him, and it's an honor and a pleasure to have him back on Dog Nation Daily. So let's talk to him right now. And, of course, he is a terrific guest on Dog Nation Daily. Every time we have a chance to talk to him, it's always a real pleasure. And it's Rennie Curran, the great former Georgia linebacker, also a guy who's made a huge impact in the community since his Georgia career has come to an end. Rennie, thank you for being back on our program. We really appreciate that, and we hope you're doing well today.
Definitely, man. Thank you guys so much for having me on. It's always an honor.
Well, let me start with this. How about some great news? I had a chance to read about you not too long ago. I guess inducted into the Gwinnett Sports Hall of Fame. Now, I know you're a humble guy and you don't want to brag on yourself, so I'm going to do a little bragging on you for you if you don't mind. You know, Gwinnett County is one of the most sports-rich counties in really the entire state of Georgia. Great athletes from all sports have come from that county. Of course, you're one of the most prominent in recent years. How much fun was it for you, and how good did it feel to be recently honored in kind of a Hall of Fame? I don't know that there's any Hall of Fame that'll ever have me inducted into it, so you can say something that most of us won't be able to say. How much fun for you was that?
Man, it was too much fun, man. Really just more than anything, just humbling. And like I said, it was an honor, man, to just be mentioned in the same sentence with a lot of the greats, guys like Jeff Francoeur, Matt Stinchcomb, David Green. I mean, you can go on and on with the amount of guys who really came to this county, and it's really a testament, and I spoke about it in my speech, to the teachers, the coaches, the pastors, everybody in the community who really poured into me, man, because I was a kid who always, along the line, needed some type of help, you know, whether that was a ride to practice or whether that was from the schools being on free and reduced lunch meals. I mean, there's so many obstacles I had to overcome, so to get to that point of being a Hall of Famer, man, it's unreal, and it's crazy. And like I said, I'm a product of the community, so I was just, you know, very thankful. And I actually had an event back at my high school this past weekend at Brookwood just to honor all those people who helped me along the way, man. So it was an amazing time and a huge honor. I'm just blessed to get that award.
I think that's a really cool thing to hear, because we obviously see you playing on fall Saturdays in Athens, and we celebrate you for your individual success, but it sounds like what you're saying is for every great football player, yourself, your teammates, the guys who are at Georgia now, there's really a story behind the story of the people who helped them get there, whether it's just a ride to practice or maybe something more significant than that there's really stories behind all these stories, it sounds like.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I could go on and on. As I said before, I had guys like Chip Smith, who was a very prominent trainer, him and Ryan Golden, who trained me all throughout high school, middle school, and high school. I mean, my parents couldn't afford it at that time, and, you know, he let me train there for free, basically, and just really, really helped me. And I can't not mention my teammates, too, because I definitely wouldn't been able to run around like I did at the linebacker position if I didn't have great defensive linemen and great scout team players who helped me to prepare for every game day in and day out. You know, I had Gino came by in my event that I had this past weekend, and I tell him thank you every single time I see him. You know, having one of the top defensive linemen in front of me to take on those huge offensive linemen, man, was everything. And I definitely wouldn't have Hall of Fame anything if it weren't for guys like him. So, yeah, it's definitely a lot to the story than the finished product.
You know, Rennie, when you have impressive-looking young players coming into Georgia, the natural thing for sports fans, not just UGA fans, but all sports fans, is to make comparisons to other players. And Georgia's got a very good-looking crop of freshman linebackers coming in. Nakobe Dean turned a lot of heads this spring. Guys that are a little banged up right now, but could be major contributors come the fall, like Ryan Davis and Tresman Marshall. And a lot of those guys are drawing comparisons to what Roquan Smith did a couple years ago, what you did during your time at Georgia. And I guess how much fun is it for you to kind of look at that too, as guys do try to follow in your footsteps and be successful at that linebacker position? And any thoughts that you can share on what you've seen from some of these young Georgia linebackers thus far?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, it's definitely an honor, man, to be mentioned and compared in any type of conversation, man. After you're done playing, some guys become a ghost, some guys become that example of the standard, you know, of being that damn good dog. And I'm glad to be one of those that's an example and not a warning. And so when it comes to just hearing my name mentioned, it's always an honor But as far as the new guys, man, I'm always interested to see how they'll acclimate to that new college atmosphere, because there's one big hurdle that I feel like a lot of them have to navigate early on, and that's the fact that when you come in, you're not going to be that guy. You have to start over. And so for a lot of these guys who are 5 stars, who are used to, being the man and being the starter, and coming in with 30,000 followers now with social media, it's like the first thing I look for is, can they mentally adjust? And by that I mean, are they humble enough to be second string and still go hard and still, perform at a high level? Because a lot of guys just can't. And that's why you see a lot of guys in this generation who are transferring and who just can't take it, and they fall off, they lose their confidence and whatnot. And so that's what I'm always interested to see, is how these guys mentally adjust. Because everybody that comes to Georgia has the talent. That's not the question, but it's their mindset. Do they have the leadership ability? And by that I mean, can they lead themselves, even when they're not in that position of success, even when the newspaper articles aren't being written about them. And just from what I've seen from Kirby Dean, I believe his name is, he looks great on film, not gonna lie. I took down a couple notes. He's got very technique sound. He's a student of the game. I listened to a couple interviews by him. He has a nose for the ball for sure. Good straight line speed, and is a smart player who can diagnose plays very well. Some of the questions I have on him, like I said before, and the other young linebackers, is mindset. Like, can he handle, like I said, working his way up the depth chart? Some guys can and can't do that. And the next thing I didn't really see on his film was him taking on big offensive linemen. In high school, you don't really have to do that. And so can he adjust to playing in front of those big 6'8", 6'6" to 6'8" SEC offensive linemen, and being able to rip off of them and still make plays? And quickness and having that sudden burst, that's something that I'm going to be looking for him at the next level, because that makes a huge difference when you talk about playing against those big offensive linemen and then the running backs in the SEC. So, but other than that, I mean, he's a very talented looking player. He's got the size. He has all the things that you can't really coach, man. So excited to see him and the other proper new linebackers.
I think that's a terrific evaluation, and one of the things you say there that I think is really interesting is you talk about the smarts and the intelligence required to play the linebacker position. Most of us, even if we aren't athletically gifted enough to do it, we have some idea of the speed and strength required to play the position you played at Georgia, and the one that Kirby Dean's going to try to play, and some of these other guys as well. But maybe the cerebral part of it is a little more difficult for us to understand. I guess, would you mind talking for a couple of minutes about the transition from high school to college in terms of all the things an SEC caliber middle linebacker has to know?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's definitely a lot more complex than people really realize. And then on top of that, like, you still have to go to class and perform with kids who are at the top of their class academically. So all those different components make it very, very challenging when you talk about coming in as a freshman and really diving in. I mean, you're basically the quarterback of the defense, so you have to know, what gaps your defensive linemen are supposed to be in, and if they're out of their place, you have to be able to adjust them. And then we talk about for yourself personally, making sure that everything from your alignment, from when the ball snaps to after the ball snaps, is correct and in alignment. Because if you're one step off, like, you're out of the play, because the offensive linemen are so quick, like, they climb so fast, and then the running backs are a little bit faster. Wide receivers are, in some cases, this is big. So all those things you have to take into account. But as far as the scheme and whatnot, like, things change on the fly. So you can go in with a call, and then all of a sudden the wide receiver moves from the right to the right side of the field to the left side of the field. You have to make that call on the fly and change your alignment, change your line of thinking on what your responsibilities are. And so all those things happen very, very quickly. And if you're not a guy who's a student of the game in the film room constantly and understanding tendencies and understanding, like, basically what's going to happen before the ball snaps based off the play call, based off the where you are on the field, you're just going to play so slow. And it doesn't matter how fast your 40-yard time is. Like I said, how many stars you have. It's those little things that make the biggest difference. And those are the things that can keep you as a great player off the field. If the coach doesn't trust that you can make that adjustment, that you can, still play at a high level, and you're not in your head and thinking, then you won't see the field. Because their jobs are on the line as well, too.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Rennie, as we wrap up here, you mentioned before you gave a great speech the night you went into the Gwinnett Hall of Fame. I know motivational speaking and being a part of the community is something you've done a lot since you've left college. For those people who might want to see more of what you're doing in the community these days and more of the impact you're having, is there a way folks can get in touch with you on social media or kind of check out some of the ththings you've got going on these days?
Yeah, definitely. So the easiest way is through my website, and that's RennieCurran.com, RennieCurran.com. And then if they want to hit me up on Instagram or on Facebook, I always do respond as well, too. I love hearing from the fans and really am blessed to be a part of this Bulldog tradition, man. I really am thankful that I made that decision, best decision I made in my life to become a Bulldog. So, yeah, if anybody wants to reach out to me, I'm always speaking at different schools, associations, and businesses and whatnot. So I'm around. I live in Chambly now. So yeah.
Rennie, that's awesome to hear. We really appreciate your time on DawgNation Daily. Great insight from you, and congratulations on a terrific honor. And we'll hopefully get a chance to catch up with you again here very soon as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, man. Go Dog.
Yes, sir.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
I tell you, you want to talk about an incredible perspective. I think Rennie Curran does a great job of sharing that there. Just terrific. And I'm paraphrasing what he says, but he says, listen, one way or another, they're going to tell stories about you when you leave Georgia. It's either going to be the cautionary tale of don't be like this guy, or one of those guys, and he used the phrase the damn good dog, one of those guys that kind of goes in that DGD category. Listen, that is just the facts of life. That when you're at a place like Georgia and you are as big a contributor as Curran was, big-time stats, people will remember your name, and they're going to remember what you did. And they'll either say, hey, be as much like this guy as you can, or try not to be like that guy. It's the cautionary tale. Well, obviously, Rennie Curran, the way that he's lived his life while at Georgia, and then after the fact, as a significant contributor in his community, that's definitely the kind of guy you want to emulate there. So that's a really cool thing. And how about the breakdown? You don't talk about getting something for free today. How about Rennie Curran breaking down Nakobe Dean's game film? Listen, that was worth the price of admission for DawgNation Daily here today. I had a great time with that. We've got another special guest coming up in just a moment. Candler Cook has written a terrific book, From Underdog to Bulldog, the story of how he became a walk-on at UGA wearing the uniform he dreamed of wearing after overcoming some pretty remarkable odds. He'll tell us about that coming up in a moment. Before that, let me invite you to check out DawgNation.com today for some special savings for Kroger as we head into Mother's Day. You can click into DawgNation.com, find out more about what's going on at your local Atlanta Kroger. Everything from sweet treats to buy one, get one on Russell Stover box chocolates, greeting cards, gift cards. Kroger's got you covered on everything, including flower delivery. This is actually kind of a cool thing because many of you don't live right next door to your mother. Well, Kroger can help you out on that. Just go to Kroger.com for Mother's Day bouquets, roses, and a whole lot more. And you can go to DawgNation.com as well to find out more about this. So check that out on the homepage there today. All right, SEC Through time. And something that I said on 960 The Ref, our radio partner in Athens, has gotten a little bit of attention, so I wanted to spend just a minute talking about that. Let me show you the tweet that 960 sent out. Now, I know this seems like me just being a blowhard like per usual, but apparently my quote was, and it was quoted by our friends at 960, seemingly every year a preseason top 10 team winds up being unranked at the end of the season. I believe, this is me talking, that Florida has a great chance of being that team this year. Now, I know what you're going to think. I know what you're going to say. BA, this is just you being a Gator hater. This is just you kind of fanning the flames on this. And I may end up being wrong on this. However, I think there is a case to be made that the Gators could indeed be as big of a disappointment as I first suggested. First of all, statistically speaking, this happens almost every year. Someone from the preseason top 10, Florida will be a preseason top 10 team almost for sure this year. Someone from the preseason top 10 will finish the year unranked. In fact, in the last 30 years, I think we've only had a small handful of times where you've had all 10 preseason top 10 teams finish in the top 25 at the end of the season. So it's going to happen with somebody. I think there's a very good chance that it's Florida. First of all, they're not beating Georgia. From a talent perspective, Georgia's just got too big of an advantage. Georgia won 42-7 in 2017, won by 19 last year. There's no big change on the Georgia roster or the Florida roster that would suggest that gap's going to be closed too much in 2019. And then apart from that, you want to talk about a lot of very close point spreads for Florida. Games against Missouri and LSU, Auburn coming in. Really, even the Miami game in week 1 is kind of within that touchdown threshold one way or another. listen, when it comes to Florida, all of those games are not going to break the same way, and it could end up being a little bit of a problem for the Gators in terms of not in any way, shape, or form living up to the expectations that Florida fans have for that season. It's worth paying attention to, I believe. By the way, kind of keeping the Florida theme going for a moment, I had to laugh about this, that Florida just announced its own home-and-home series with Colorado. Now, it has been a million years, seemingly, since Florida has played a non-conference game outside of its own state. They just haven't done a lot of that kind of stuff. Had the game on a neutral deal with Michigan a couple years ago, but being in someone else's stadium, that's become essentially something that never happens for Florida. But they got the series scheduled with Colorado. It's for many years in the future, like all of these things end up being. But there's actually a lot of Florida fans who kind of complained about this. Given the series that Florida State is scheduled and Georgia's scheduled and a lot of these other programs are scheduled, too many Florida fans, and you can go check this on Twitter, the official Florida account that tweets this out. The responses from Gators fans were not really all that complimentary about all of this. So a little bit of backlash from Gators fans about scheduling kind of a lower-tier Pac-12 team as opposed to something else they could have scheduled. And then one more point that I wanted to quickly mention here. There's a website out there called WarrenNolan.com. Now, I don't know who Warren Nolan is, but it's a kind of stat deal. And I was looking at this. There's this thing called Pythagorean win total, where you take the number of points you scored, the number of points you allowed, and you kind of do some math, and you kind of figure out what your real record was compared to what your expected record could have been. And according to the data there at WarrenNolan.com, a couple SEC teams may have underperformed compared to expectations last year. Take a close look at Auburn, take a close look at Mississippi State. Maybe there's a chance there's a little bit of a bounce back from a record standpoint for both those teams, and it'll probably be a subject that we get into more in the future. But for now, we'll make that your SEC through. And here on DawgNation Daily, and coming up in just a moment, we're going to get a chance to talk to Candler Cook, the great author of From Underdog to Bulldog, a terrific story of how he went from being a walk-on at Georgia to being on the field for a game. I told our audience a little earlier, it's almost like a real-life Rudy story, if you're familiar with what happened at Notre Dame with Rudy getting on the field. Candler Cook kind of traveled down the same path to get there, and I think that's pretty interesting. We're going to talk to him and hear from him in just a moment. Before we get to that, can I do one thing that I was going to do a little earlier and didn't quite have time to do while we catch up with Candler here? I talked about Tate Ratledge, the four-star offensive lineman, who's about to make his announcement and his decision on Monday. Well, another kind of recruit that Georgia's been in the mix with, probably less so lately than it is with Ratledge, also made a recent announcement, and that's Justin Rogers. I think Rogers put as top 5 on Twitter yesterday. You see the programs, Georgia in the mix along with Kentucky and LSU, Michigan, and Tennessee. It seems like lately we've heard a little bit more about the Tennessee part of this, the Kentucky part of this, than we have with the other programs. You'll remember, and Jeff Sintel kind of got into this a bit yesterday on Before the Hedges, that at one point in time, Rogers, who, I mean, there was a time, and I don't really do the mock classes, my expected class too much, because the fact is I'm going to be wrong as often as I'm going to be right, and I guess many people probably would, so my opinion's only worth so much when it comes to projecting where these young men are going to go. But Rogers was a guy for a while that there was so much, I guess, smoke around. When Dwan Mathis committed to Georgia, if you'll remember, for instance, he and Rogers go to the same high school. Rogers seemed as happy about that as anybody. There was a while when Rogers seemed like he was going to be the next big offensive lineman in line to do some things for Georgia. But there's kind of been a change on that. It sounds like that Georgia has had Rogers evaluated as a guard, and now Rogers wants to play either offensive tackle or he might even want to be a defensive lineman. And to hear Jeff Sintel tell it, and you can check out yesterday's edition of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger to kind of learn more about this, to hear him tell it, there is, to a certain extent, maybe Georgia just doesn't know what its evaluation of Rogers at those positions would possibly be. But Rogers does drop his top 5. Georgia is included. He's going to make his announcement coming up on May the 20th. Now, the reason why Georgia is still in the mix here is because, as Jeff reported at DawgNation.com, Rogers is going to take an official visit to Georgia. I believe it's May 17th, just a couple of days before he makes his announcement on May 20th. So that is going down. Rogers is coming to Georgia. But at this point in time, it's difficult to make sense of kind of how he views the situation with Georgia, knowing that he may have a little bit different position in mind at the next level, and Tennessee and Kentucky have made a pretty strong push. The other thing that was kind of interesting about where Rogers kind of had his placement of his top 5 you'll see one of the schools that did not make that list was Ohio State after Rodgers at one point in time had been an Ohio State commitment. So there's clearly some changing over and some thoughts about Ohio State. I don't know if this is Ohio State backing off of him or if Rodgers moving off of the Buckeyes, but clearly a little bit of a change here when it comes to that situation. The school that he was once committed to now doesn't even make his top 5, so that's worth paying attention to. And as we said before, off the top of the program, the bigger offensive line story, because it's more immediate, it's going to happen on Monday, and as of late, it seems like Georgia's been more involved. It's what's going on there with Tate Ratledge. And, of course, that Georgia-Tennessee battle, we all understand and know that when it comes to Georgia and Tennessee right now, they're recruiting rivals in particular, but when it comes to these offensive linemen especially, because that's one of the positions we've seen Will Friend and the Vols have some success with. Think about Wanye Morris, who may not have been as high on Georgia's board as he was on others, but that's a big win for Tennessee. And certainly Darnell Wright, I think, was a player that Georgia would have liked to have had, and yet ultimately that ends up not happening. He ends up sticking with the Vols and heading there. So that's kind of an interesting thing worth paying attention to and taking a look at. We'll kind of follow in on that. All right, while we wait on our guest to join us, let me also pop in here and get a few more comments. We'll kind of roll through all of this. Jennifer Caldwell-Sperlin says, when it comes to Tate Ratledge, do we know the time for his announcement? Jennifer, my understanding is he is going to go sometime on Monday morning, and obviously DawgNation is going to have plenty of coverage of that. John Arena, also on the subject of recruiting, says, I want Keely Ringo on a roster so bad. Dude is going to whoop some gator tail. And, yeah, Ringo is one of those guys that, I've never lied. I'm easily influenced, and Ringo is a player that I liked. But having had a chance to talk to Jeff Sintel about him a couple of times, Ringo has pretty quickly become, and if you're watching on video, you can see some of his highlights right now, Ringo has become a player that I really love because Jeff really likes him a lot. And I think that Jeff will tell you it's not in any way a lock for Georgia to get Ringo. It's a pretty significant battle. Seems like it may be Georgia versus Texas for the young man out of Arizona. But Jeff will tell you from a game film standpoint and an industry buzz standpoint that Ringo as a defensive back is as good as they come. And for Georgia, who's looking to stay strong in that position, I think that secondary is kind of quietly going to be among Georgia's strengths this year. I think Georgia's done a good job of developing defensive backs. That's going to come to fruition again this year, even the absence of DeAndre Baker. But you want to maintain that momentum and keep it going. I think Keely Ringo is going to give Georgia a really good chance to do that if they're able to win with that commitment. I think John Arena is right to kind of bring that up. J.R. Mason on the subject of our Gator Hater Updater, which we'll do in a moment. He says, man, I hope it can reach 10,000 days. Yeah, so listen, we love the idea of the Gator Hater Updater. Keep it on climbing, and we'll keep doing that one over and over again as it does. James Crump, also on the subject of recruiting here in our Facebook comment section, talking about the combination. I like this. It's almost like a political thing of Lloyd and Milton 2020. Yeah, those are two running mates we can all get behind. The other sort of pairs of running mates for 2020, there may be some disagreement in our comment sections on, but the subject of Lloyd and Milton, that is certainly one that everybody's going to be able to agree with. I think that's really well said and really well done. Let me pop over to YouTube here for a moment as well and get some conversation on there. Also, fun show today, and appreciate all of your interaction and being part of all of this. Looks like some fun stuff happening over here. Pretty fun stuff. Cliff Bain says, I'm the number one Gator hater here. And yeah, listen, that's a fun, nice competition around DawgNation these days. I do really enjoy the way that you've got a pretty good little rivalry going between Georgia and Florida, and it's been playing out this offseason. It's been kind of nice to see. So that's been really fun. All right, we'll get more of your comments coming up. We'll have our R.S. Andrews cool down a little bit later on in the program, so that's all going to be great. For now, though, let me introduce you to a special guest. His name is Candler Cook. He's written a terrific book. It's From Underdog to Bulldog. It's kind of an amazing tale of how he ended up in a UGA uniform, kind of an improbable fashion. Candler, welcome to DawgNation Daily. We appreciate your time.
Yes, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So kind of look at your story and kind of the genesis for this book, I guess one of the things that was kind of amazing to me is, and we'll kind of build, to the punchline here of the fact that you get into a game at Georgia, you get a chance to put that uniform on, and I think we've heard the kind of walk-on stories before, but I would say that for most of those walk-ons, they were probably star high school players at least, and it sounds like from your standpoint that wasn't necessarily the case for you. Would you mind kind of giving us kind of the story before you got to Georgia? I mean, we would expect even a walk-on at Georgia to have been a very good high school player, but maybe your story was a little bit different. Would you mind telling us about that?
Sure, and you're right. Most of them were star players in high school. I really never was. So I was out of full strength my senior year in high school. Just really was not athletically gifted in terms of football skills at all, and really just knew that my goal was I wanted to play football for Georgia. I grew up such a huge fan going to games with my dad, and I wanted to do everything in my power to make that happen. And so when I got to Georgia, that involved coming up with my own training program, eating as much healthy food as I possibly could, and starting to try out for the team. And, went through 2 tryouts, one my freshman year, one my sophomore year, and got cut after both of those, but continued to improve and get better until my junior year I was able to make the team.
So I got to ask you about that part of this process. As you're kind of doing the training and you're kind of transforming your body, I'm imagining that's a pretty difficult process. Along the way to this, did you ever just feel like it's not going to be physically possible to transform myself, get big enough, I'm assuming, improved athleticism? I'm not going to be able to do enough of this, because I think we'd all sort of feel like we deal with some physical limitations. What did it feel like in those moments when it seemed like you may be bumping up against your own physical limitations?
There definitely were a lot of those, and the main one that comes to mind is right when I was cut the second time. At this time, I had already gone from 140 pounds all the way up to 215. So, gotten a ton faster, a ton bigger, a ton stronger, and really thought that I was close, and was cut, and then was given that performance review sheet saying that I was too small, too slow, average strength, and that I was a Division III player at best. And so, that said in no uncertain terms that I was not where I needed to be. And it was really tough. I had to take a step back and reevaluate a lot of the things that I was doing. I changed over to a new workout plan. I added a few more meals to my routine to the point where I was eating 10 full-size meals a day. And then I decided to change positions to defensive end, even though I had never played it before. I just taught myself by watching YouTube videos. But I had to be willing to step back and take some risks and find a new area where I could maybe add some value to the team. So that was definitely a trying process, but sometimes those obstacles or failures can really help you out if you approach them the right way.
How much are you having to eat to gain, I think you said 60-something pounds or whatever. How much are you having to eat to do that?
Yeah, it ended up being 120 pounds that I put on. And I ended up measuring it. It was a little over 15,000 calories a day, just because, I was naturally very slim and eventually bulked up to 265. So basically every hour and a half, as long as I would awake, I'd be eating. Drank 2 gallons of whole milk every day, 3 gallons of water. So it was pretty extraordinary lengths that I had to go to in terms of just nutrition to be able to get my body up to that size.
The book is called From Underdog to Bulldog, and you're hearing some of the story here of going from being a high school player to trying to make the team, being turned down, and then eventually earning that spot on the roster, and finally getting into a game, I believe it was in 2011 against New Mexico State, if I'm correct. And, Candler, I'm not a football player, but I've been on the sideline for these games, and we know that feeling of the crowd in the stands, the noise, and how it kind of reverberates off the grass. And even for a game like New Mexico State, it's just going to feel different than a practice, and especially for you, knowing what you had overcome to get to that point. What was your feeling when you're wearing the uniform that you had grown up dreaming of, and now you're on this field between the hedges, and really this was the culmination of a dream? What were those feelings like for you?
Well, it was an amazing feeling. I really felt kind of 2 different things at the same time. One was such a great appreciation for that moment, because there are a lot of guys that maybe were preferred walk-ons and were even recruited by Georgia out of high school. They'll be on the team for 4 years and never play a snap. So just getting the opportunity to play in this game was huge. I was so excited. It was later in the fourth quarter, so by this point the stands had emptied out a little bit, so my friends and family were able to come right down to the 50-yard line to watch. So I knew the significance of that moment, how much it would mean to me for the rest of my life. But on the other hand, I was just focused on the football side of things. I'd spent all these years practicing, learning the playbook and running all these drills, and I wanted to make sure that, this moment wasn't going to be too big for me and that I'd be able to focus on what I'm doing and just execute the play that was called. So really both of those things were going on.
I think there's a fascination on the part of many fans, too, for especially someone like yourself who grew up as a fan. When you get in on the inside of the program, even before you got into a game, you're still going to practices every day. You're still seeing the private side of Mark Richt and the private side of the other players. What was that experience like? I'm imagining there's a nature of it that probably had to be surreal, but as a person who was kind of behind the closed doors of Georgia football, what was that experience like for you?
It was amazing. I was really impressed with just how personable everyone was. Guys that you think might not even have the time of day for everybody would, reach out and try to help you with some plays or a drill. And I'd say it was a little bit of shock and awe at first. There was one moment when I was a freshman in high school. I went with my dad to a game, and before the game, they had a few injured players signing, jerseys or footballs for people. And one of my favorite players at the time, Craig Lumpkin, was a running back, and he autographed a shirt for me. Well, fast forward 4 years later, I was now a freshman trying out for the team, and he was a fifth-year senior. And so to line up, in the weight room or in a drill against somebody that I looked up to before was just a pretty incredible feeling. But I would say the team was very welcoming, very helpful. Like when I was trying out as a linebacker, Rennie Curran was always really helpful with helping to teach me the plays. And then at defensive end, guys like Garrison Smith and DeMarcus Dobbs were always really helpful and give pointers. So I'd say it was a great experience.
That's really neat. Is there anything about Georgia football as a player wearing the uniform every day that's different than fans would assume that it would be?
Well, I would just say there's so much work that goes to the back end of it outside of the football field. You practice probably, I'd say, an hour or so longer than you do in high school, but you meet for several hours longer. So you're in meeting rooms, 2, 3, 4 hours a day sometimes, depending on if it's, summer camp versus in the fall. And there's just so much film study that goes into it at the collegiate level that's just very different from what you'd see at high school.
So you traveled down a path, and the book tells the story from underdog to bulldog, but you traveled down a path of being a high school guy or even a young kid dreaming of playing Georgia football, and ultimately you get a chance to wear that uniform, you get a chance to be in a game for the Dogs. And now, looking back on that experience, what would you say that you've kind of learned about, I guess, life from traveling down this certainly unique path?
Well, I'd say it's taught me a lot of things, and that's really the main takeaway from my book is after every chapter I try to relate what I went through to something that the reader can take away, just an actionable item that they can use off the football field. So I'd say it's taught me, the importance of hard work, resilience, being able to step back and kind of reevaluate your problem solving. There are times where, in business where we may not be able to do something the way we've always done it, so you have to kind of take a step back and reinvent yourself, similar to how I had to take a step back and be willing to try out for a different position. So I'd say there are a lot of lessons like that have really carried over after football.
Chandler, I think it's a great story, and for people who want to find the book, From Underdog to Bulldog, your tale of becoming a walk-on at UGA and getting a chance to culminate a dream, where can people find the book and get a chance to read it for themselves?
They can either find it on Amazon or on the website for the book. It's just www.fromunderdogtobulldog.com.
Well, Chandler, we appreciate you being here on DawgNation Daily and telling your story, and we hope a lot of our audience will check that out. And with Father's Day coming up not too long from now, or Mother's Day as well this weekend, it's also, I'm imagining, making a pretty nice gift, too. So, Chandler, thanks for your time. We really appreciate you being on the program.
Yes, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Great stuff there from Chandler Cook, the one-time Georgia player, telling his story of how he got into a UGA uniform. And I guess as a add-on to that conversation, I would say that there is something really special that happens when you push yourself to do something that you don't think that you can do or you're not sure that you can do. And when you keep pushing on that, even beyond the point where it almost seems crazy to keep up with it, because everything feels like a success in the beginning and almost everything feels like a failure in the middle when you're trying something and you're kind of tired of trying and failing and listen, none of us like rejection, but pushing beyond that point of the middle part of something, when newness has worn off and now it just sort of feels stale and tired and tedious, and you feel like an idiot for keeping on with something that almost no one thinks you can do. Special things seem to happen in life when you keep going beyond that, and Chandler Cook, I think, does a pretty good job of telling his own version of that, and I hope that we'll all eventually have our own kind of story like that to tell. All right, so really fun on the program today. Really appreciate all of you being a part of it. And I will quickly remind you here one more time to make sure you check out DawgNation.com, because I'd love the idea of as many of you as possible being with us as part of our DawgNation Days of Summer event coming up. Starting off on June 13th at Callaway Resort and Gardens. VIP opportunities still available. You got to get your room booked. You can also register for your chance to win one of those VIP stays, but don't let that stop you from getting registered, because this VIP thing is limited. It's not like a false, phony, hey, we're just doing this to kind of create scarcity. No, there really is only so much room available for our VIP event that night, so we want you to get in and be a part of that. There's a public event at 6 p.m. that everybody can be a part of, but the VIP is kind of a smaller room, special circumstances. So get in and get involved with that, and let us know if you want to play some golf too, because we're going to do that on Friday. Also, 922 days. That's how long it's been since the lousy, stinking Gators have beaten Georgia. It's our Gator Hater Updater. We'll see you tomorrow on DawgNation Daily. And on video. Good to have you with us. Fun conversation. I know I kind of sort of fitted and started with a couple comments sections during the regular program, but we'll kind of stretch our legs here and have a little longer conversation as a part of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. As we do so, I'll remind you, air, heating, plumbing, electric, they do it all for us around Dog Nation. They will do it for you as well, because you want it to be cold in your house. This time of year, if it's not cold at night, you can't sleep, right? Those hot, stuffy bedrooms, nobody wants that. You want the cool down that you get from R.S. Andrews and the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. So please check them out online at rsandrews.com. All right. Somebody mentioned there was a Candler Hall at UGA. I'm pretty sure that's named after Asa Candler, if I had to guess, but I may be wrong about that. Ken Feinberg says that he wishes UGA would do more for their walk-ons. And obviously, that's one of the things that in the Kirby Smart era, they're trying to kind of build up and do a little more, and kind of be a little bit more involved, and certainly providing opportunities for walk-ons. And listen, when it comes to a program, as Ken notes, and he would know, when it comes to this, that there's the role that the non-famous football players play on a Georgia roster is pretty important. Scout team stuff, we know that was a crucial part of what happened in the build-up towards the Rose Bowl a couple of years ago, and if Georgia's making a playoff run this year, it's going to be just as crucial. And for opponents that do something a little bit different, like what the Georgia Tech offense was under Paul Johnson, or just something from any kind of schematic situation that you don't see on a regular basis, those scout team players can do a good job of helping getting you ready for that, and many of those are walk-ons. And there's just some real value in playing against a quality player during practice, even if it's not a famous scholarship player, former 4 or 5-star, but a guy who's giving it his all during practice. That makes the starters better. So there are a lot of guys that you've never heard of, that you'll maybe never see wearing the silver breeches, who've actually contributed more to Georgia football than you realize, because Kirby Smart's not just blowing smoke when he says tough practices make good teams. I think that's been proven over and over, and the full complement of walk-on players give you a chance to do that. Dipset has an interesting question. Is it safe to say natty or bust this season? I think that's a really good question, because on the one hand, I am so tired, many of you are as well, of hearing all these Florida fans with their 14,000 days and the so-and-so of, Georgia's going to come up short again. I'm so tired of all of that. And so from that standpoint, given the pressure that opposing fan bases are putting on Georgia, given the nature of the Georgia roster, on the one hand, it seems obvious that, yes, this is a national championship or bust season. However, on the other hand, Georgia is only going to have the third best odds to win the national championship. And were it to play Alabama in a neutral site field, and it likely will, Georgia will be a point spread underdog. And were it to play Clemson on a neutral site field in the college football playoff, it'll also be quite likely a point spread underdog in that game too. So it is a year that has the feeling of national champion or bust, and yet Georgia is going to have to kind of exceed expectations based on the gambling public anyway to actually get that done. So I think that's kind of an interesting dilemma. And for now, I'll just kind of lay out both sides of the argument, but I'd love for people to respond to Dipset's question about this. Now, I know we didn't do our summer Q&A today just because we were too busy on the regular show to get it done, but I think that's a pretty good summer Q&A type question for Dipset. I mean, just point blank, bottom line, is this national championship or bust? The one reason why I would be tempted to say, and I'm not trying to be lackadaisical or less than full tilt ready to go, the one reason why I would sort of hold off on saying national championship or bust is because my thought is that Georgia football is not going to end after the 2019 season. And I know you could lose Andrew Thomas and maybe Jake Fromm and maybe DeAndre Swift and maybe a number of others, but I don't see any reason to suggest that Georgia's going to be all that much less competitive in 2020 than it is in 2019. It may be some new names, and at that point in time, we're a little deeper into the Kirby Smart era. We've seen a number of Kirby recruits cycle all their way completely through the program, so we'll kind of be in that second era of Kirby Smart coaching tenure at Georgia. But that's one of the reasons I'd stop short of saying 2019 or bust for national championship. But I think it's a great question. It sounds like Connor Riley wants to weigh in on that too.
Once again, you try to filibuster to not answer the question. I will answer it.
No, I gave an answer. Listen, you got to understand something. I'm the point guard here too. I have to set up both sides of the conversation. I have to build up everybody to be a part of this. And so after kind of laying out the groundwork, I gave you my answer on this. Sounds like you very quickly have an answer.
Yeah, I think it's a national championship or bust type season,
But what does the or bust part mean? Because you can't say it's national championship or bust and then not describe what bust would look like.
Not winning a national championship.
But that's not what or bust means. I'm not trying to be tedious. I'm not trying to be.
I know there's a lot of gray area. It is in my opinion, it is a black or white season. It is either you win the national championship or this season is a disappointment.
Y'all join me on this conversation because what I think that Connor's doing right now is defining these terms in the wrong way. What you're saying is anything other than a national championship a success? I agree with you on that. If Georgia's like third in the country at the end of the year, that to me is not a successful season. But I take national championship or bust to mean something different. National championship or bust would seem to mean that either Kirby Smart is now in danger of not winning one in the future, or the Georgia program after 4 years has become a disappointment, and that's not what I'm going to say. I think that success for Georgia this season is defined as winning a national championship and nothing else. Anything short of that, I think, is lack of success for Georgia this year. That seems to be what you're saying, and I agree with you. But or bust comes attached with a consequence. Or bust means you bust out, and I don't believe Georgia busts. I don't believe Georgia busts out if it doesn't win one this year.
I think you're over analyzing. I believe it was Diplo's comment.
Dipset.
Dipset's comment.
Please, full credit. Full credit.
I think he's just sort of talking in the confines of the 2019 season. I don't think any Georgia fan is making these grand sweeping. If Georgia doesn't win it this year, Kirby can never win a national championship.
Yeah, John Anthony, way smarter than you are, says most of the time, or bust, when that phrase is used, it's the ending of something. And I agree with John on this. Nothing comes to an end if Georgia doesn't win it all this year, but I agree with Connor that the only definition of success, if that's what you're saying, and I think it is, the only definition of success is winning a national championship. I think that's well done. Charles Kaiser, though, flat out says this is national championship or bust. Let me go over to YouTube and see what they're saying. And as I'm transitioning, I'll remind you that one of the things we've talked about in this program is the number of times when coaches who've won their first championship, the frequency with which that happens in the first 4 years of their coaching tenure. That would seem to believe that means you have extra pressure on Kirby Smart here going into his fourth year. I'm talking about Urban Meyer a couple of times. His first go-around at Ohio State, his first go-around at Florida, Nick Saban, his first go-around at LSU, his first go-around at Alabama, Jimbo Fisher when he was at Florida State, go back more than almost 2 decades ago now when it was Bob Stoops. I know this in retrospect does not seem like a particularly consequential national championship, but Larry Coker, when he won his at Miami, it was kind of the same way. In the last 2 decades of college football, you only have 2 outliers to that discussion. You've got Mack Brown, who won his national championship almost at the end of his coaching career at Texas, and you've got Dabo Swinney, who's now won 2, but when he won his first, if memory serves, it was like his 8th year of coaching or something like that. So I think the presence of the most recent outlier, the current reigning national champion, might mean that this thing of if you don't win a championship early, you don't win one at all, that might make that statistical evidence just less relevant now. So interesting. Let's keep going. A lot of comments. GB2 says we need to win a national championship to be able to recruit with Clemson. I think that's an interesting point from GB as well, that you do have this little bit of a perception gap with Clemson, that a guy like Brian Brzee seemed to have a lot about Georgia he really liked, but ultimately couldn't say no to Clemson. If Georgia finishes third again and Clemson finishes first again, it's almost like that perception gap probably widens a little bit. So in an ironic basis, not winning a national championship this year will make it a little harder to win one in the future because Clemson will use that to its benefit and its leverage once again. Alabama's used it. Clemson's used it. They'll both use it against Georgia. So I agree with you on that it gets a little harder to win these recruiting battles against Clemson when they can claim national championships and Georgia can't. That's just a fact. GB's right about that. Doesn't make it an impossibility, but he's at least right. Enrique Murillo says, how can you say that when we have been out-recruiting Clemson the past 3 years? Enrique, here's what I'm going to tell you to be careful. In some respects, Georgia has been out-recruiting Clemson, but when it comes to Clemson, because they don't sign huge classes, you can't necessarily use their overall class ranking as a determination for how well Clemson's recruited. For instance, this year, Clemson's going to probably have what they don't typically have, which is a top 1, top 2 recruiting class. They're going to probably have that this year, and that's not something they typically do. And Georgia has had higher rankings, and in some cases gone head-to-head with Clemson and won. Play Webb's an example of that. But you can also cite some examples where Georgia went head-to-head with Clemson and has not won. I think it'd be very interesting to do kind of a tale of the tape. Here's how many true head-to-head battles there have been. How many has Georgia won? How many has Clemson won? Unfortunately, there are a couple of high-profile examples that have gone the way of the Tigers. So Georgia has recruited as well as anybody. No one would deny that. But I wouldn't be so quick to say, simply because Georgia's had the higher rated recruiting classes, that it's necessarily out-recruited Clemson. In some cases it has, in some cases maybe has not. RT367 on YouTube says, BA, we have to win the SEC first to make the playoff to contend for the national championship. Short of that would be disappointing effort with the talent and depth we have. Winning the national title should be a bonus. I kind of agree with that as well, but I'm also wise enough to know that I won't feel that way come December. If Georgia beats Alabama and does what up to this point in time it has not done, and Kirby Smart also talked about that yesterday on that WJOX interview, if it gets that done, I guess somewhat logical fan might say, well, this has been a good season because my team has done something up to this point it had not done. And yet, y'all know, come Peach Bowl against Clemson or something like that, or Fiesta Bowl against whomever you be playing in that game, Oklahoma, Ohio State, some team like that, then it becomes just the goalpost has now been moved to a new obstacle, and people will spend 2 seconds being glad Georgia beat Alabama and will now simply look ahead to the next domino to be toppled, and that's just human nature, and I'll be right there with all of you. But I think it's a good comment. Mike D says, need to quit looking ahead and take care of every game week by week. Get out of these dream scenarios and focus on reality each week. Get it done, focus, and hunker down. So, Mike D, here's my very serious response to that. First of all, 2 things. One of the reasons why we've done the Own the East campaign the last couple of years is because of my belief that Georgia does need to own that division and make that the first goal for what it does every single year. You're absolutely right about that, that punching that ticket is the prerequisite to punching all the other tickets that come beyond that. However, with all due respect, something that I greatly disagree with is that when you describe the concept of quit looking ahead, take care of every game week by week by week, that's what the Georgia players and coaches should do. That's their job, and obviously when they talk about things like that, that's what they say. But we don't have any kind of obligation to focus only on Vanderbilt week 1. That's not something we have an obligation to do. We are fans, and we get to have a good time, and I'm kind of the media guy that facilitates all this conversation. There's nothing lost when we also look ahead. There's nothing lost when we also kind of pay attention to the bigger picture for Georgia. And I know you got players from time to time that peek in on all this kind of stuff, but I don't think this conversation is a distraction to them at all. I don't think that's the case whatsoever. We don't have to engage in the coach speak or the coach think. We don't have to do that because ultimately this is all just fun for us. But you're right about the team. Owning the East and taking care of those division games, the specific teams in the division that could potentially cause you the biggest problem, and then all the goals that come because of that, from the team's perspective, that's exactly right. Yeah, Mike D says, I agree with you totally. Don't think I'm not wanting those things to happen. Yeah, that's well said, Mike. That's a great comment. Appreciate that. Looks like Elite's on his way out of the program today. Enrique Murillo says goodbye to him. Elite baller, you have a good day. Dustin Harper says, can't wait to show Notre Dame in week 4 what a true playoff team is. Yeah, Dustin, this may make me a small person, but I'm kind of right there with you. I think that there is a little extra motivation for Georgia in that game. And I will admit, and I know I can be a little greedy from time to time, but I'm looking for more than just Georgia won that game by a late field goal back in 2017. I'm looking for a whole lot more than that in 2019. I really am. Now, by the way, Notre Dame shows up in the top 5 in some of these way too early top 25s. So we're probably about a week or so away from magazines being on the newsstand. Now, I know for you young bucks, my buddy Connor Riley included, y'all couldn't find a newsstand right now if I gave you directions, but
because they don't exist.
I love going to
New York.
I love going to the newsstand. I love getting my magazines. I'm talking about the hard copy. They're like $9. They're so expensive because it, I guess, costs a lot to make magazines these days. But I love going and getting these magazines and getting a big stack of them. Lindy's and Athlon and Street and Smith is back on newsstands these days. It's nice to see them back in the mix. It used to be Sporting News. They've kind of transitioned to new brand now. They're Street and Smiths. I grew up reading that magazine. It's going to be on newsstands. Phil Steele will be out in July at some point in time. I'll buy it and never read it because it's 7,000 pages long. But the point is, I love these magazines. And in some of those, Notre Dame's going to show up in the top 5 in some of those. Ben Gunnell says it's all or nothing. Not sure why BA has such a strange interpretation of or bust. But Ben. It's not that strange because some other people kind of took it the same way because you say all or nothing. Now, nothing, I'm not trying to be semantic.
You're just sitting here just micro-analyzing.
I'm not trying to do that. That's not what I'm trying to do.
The thing yesterday with the track athlete, thoughts and prayers to him and his family.
For sure.
But when it first came out, you were parsing the difference between impaled and pierced.
Well, because that was obviously a serious situation. You want to make sure you get the facts on that incredibly right. Words do matter. And boy, what a situation that was.
Yeah. Very, very fortunate that it did not end up being much worse.
Yeah, it's just scary, and I feel bad for the parents in a situation like this or just the family, the friends, because now we learned about this on Wednesday. The actual thing had happened on Tuesday, but you know how this is. They're going to hear about this the same way any of us would with a loved one or a friend or something like that, and it's like you can't absorb all the information quickly enough at one time. It's just a harrowing situation, and it sounds like it's going to work out and be all good and taken care of. Full recovery is expected, in other words. But man, the details of this are really, really bizarre, and I am just thankful that it sounds like ultimately it's going to be a full recovery. Johnny Lester on the subject of magazines. Jamie Newberg had a magazine. Yeah, listen, Jamie was a guy that I haven't talked to Jamie in a while, but I knew him really well for a long time. He was a great college football guy, a big recruiting guy, kind of the early days there. Jamie's a good guy. What else we got here on YouTube? Blind Squirrel Sports says, thankful that Coach Smart has this program in such great shape that we are even having a national championship or bust conversation. Go Dogs, dadgummit. Good stuff from Blind Squirrel Sports. And I did love the audio from Smart on WJOX this morning, too, the one we played earlier at the top of our program. I thought that was really good and really well done. His reaction to, I think it's an odd criticism to say, why aren't you playing Oklahoma until 2031? This is a logistics discussion. This is about the nuts and bolts of people you've never heard of that we'll never meet sitting in some office somewhere trying to figure out some sort of spreadsheet to how to make all these schedules things work. And I think Kirby Smart's discussion about that was as good as it probably could be. I do. Georgia Peach says, I'm glad it's almost summer break. I work on a university campus with the students all gone. There's no line at Chick-fil-A. Yeah, there are these certain little lines of demarcation to let you know that you've kind of reached summer no matter where you happen to live, and I guess that's probably a pretty good one there for sure. Derek Smith says, I played Pee Wee football with Jeremy Pruitt. Now his dad's coaching my high school. Oh, Derek, that's pretty cool. I heard that, is it Dade County, Florida? Is that where Jeremy Pruitt just got a job? Not Jeremy Pruitt. Jeremy Pruitt's the Tennessee coach. But Pruitt's dad just got a pretty high-profile high school job. I heard about that. Derek, is it down in South Florida? Is that where it is? I don't know why. I couldn't remember where it was, but for sure. Blind Squirrel Sports says, thanks, B. It was cool hearing you say dadgummit. Yeah, now dadgummit's a word I use a good bit. Somebody mentioned Bobby Bowden in our comment section before. I know that's kind of a Bowden word, but yeah, dadgummit's a word that I'm pretty familiar with. I'm not really a bad language guy. That's not really my thing. So there's a lot of dadgummits and things like that in my vernacular. Mark Godfrey on Facebook says, hey, BA, with Mecole gone, do you think they were going to let LeCount bust through the banner with the bat his first year? That's a good question. How cool would that look, by the way? Are you allowed to use a foreign object to bust through the sign? I know this is kind of a odd conversation, but if they would let Georgia, if the SEC or whoever governs sign run-throughs, do you think anybody would have a problem if Richard LeCount bust through the sign a la McCole Hardman, who did do it first for years and years, or at least the years he was in Athens? If Richard LeCount did that with a bat, would that be considered bad form, some sort of violation of a rule to have a foreign object so close to the start of the game? I'm guessing it probably wouldn't. I think that'd look amazing. That would look incredible. I would be 1,000% for that. Ray June Johnson says our defense needs the attitude of kill them all and the paramedics sort them out. And, yeah, listen, I think they're trying to build a mentality very similar to that right now. Hayes Calloway giving us a Ric Flair quote, to be the best, you got to beat the best. So I like all that there as well. Robert Barnes says that Pruitt's dad's coaching in Georgia. Where'd I get Dade County from? I apologize for that. Brandon Vernon also saying it's Georgia. Where? What high school is it then? LeBrian Hudson on the subject of recruiting says we have to finish number 5 on recruiting in order to maintain the talent level. That seems about right. Connor said the other day he thought Georgia would still finish top 3, and that may be a possibility.
Jeremy Pruitt's dad is coaching at Dade County High School in Northwest Georgia.
Oh.
Not to be confused with Dade County, actually, in
Miami. Okay, well, there you go. Well, good for him. Glad to see him get that job then. Gerald Harmon says Brian Brzee could be a bust. Listen, I guess anything's possible, but so far that doesn't seem all that likely for Mr. Brzee. Chad Williams says, I don't understand why SEC schools need to go play out-of-conference games. SEC wins aren't good enough anymore.
No,
I think what Kirby Smart's trying to do is leave no doubt. Now, we also haven't seen the SEC champion left out of the college football playoff yet, so up to this point, they've all been good enough. But I think Kirby Smart's trying to anticipate a new era in which there's going to be 3 at-large teams every year. Because if you get to that 18 playoff, what is that? Almost 40% or whatever of the playoff each year is going to be made up of non-conference champions. And I think he's trying to anticipate having the best overall resume there. But one of the reasons why I played the Wilbon Kornheiser audio off the top is, national guys giving Georgia a break, because ultimately, I mean, these media types are still going to do what are going to want to do, and the playoff committee is going to be somewhat influenced by that, but they're also going to kind of march to beat of their own drum. And if they want to make an argument against a team that even plays in Oklahoma and a Texas and a Florida State and a Clemson, if that's what they want to do, they'll just make up some criteria out of thin air and just do it. So when you fast forward all these years in the future, I'm glad Georgia's playing the games because the games themselves have value. But in terms of being the best overall strategy for getting to the college football playoff, I will admit I'm not quite so sure that's true. And yet, nonetheless, I'm still glad Georgia's playing the games. Jimmy Hoskins says, BA, who do you think will be the next defensive player to commit to UGA? I don't know if he's the next or not, nor do I know if he's coming to Georgia, but it seems like there's more smoke around Mikhail Sherman than anybody else. Now, I don't know, how long you got to wait on that, but that's the first name that would come to mind for me on that.
Yeah, names to watch on that defensive side of the ball after conversing with Jeff Sintel yesterday. Lenneth Whitehead, who's a linebacker from Athens Academy. That's a name to watch. Keely Ringo seems like a very far away, long
Yeah, that's
time
not the
commitment.
next name one way or another.
That's probably going to be a either December signing day. I believe he might be an early enrollee. So that's a long-term name to watch. Mikhail Sherman, he's visited Georgia and Ohio State on official visits, so and those are his two finalists. So it could be one of those things, just whenever he thinks the decision is right, that's when he could theoretically pop, and that could be in this month. It could be in December. We don't really know until then.
Robert Barnes says he thinks the top player from the week before should be the one with the bat that gets the bust through first. I mean, I know in college football we're getting kind of prop heavy, not just Georgia, but all these programs are getting pretty heavy with the props. I'd be okay with that. I'd be okay with giving the not. I mean, I guess it's LeCount's bat. I guess he's the one that gets to decide what to do with it. But I'd be okay with a different person having the bat. I just like the idea of the first person to bust through the sign each week doing so with the bat. I just think that kind of looks kind of cool. That's not bad at all. Did somebody wear John Atkins' chain last year? I don't remember that.
I believe Jonathan Ledbetter had the chain.
Looks good. Listen, I think Jonathan Ledbetter's a tough dude, but I don't know that Ledbetter, because he's kind of got the studious look to him a little bit. I don't know that he looks quite as tough as John Atkins did wearing that chain. John Atkins looked like the scariest guy in the world with that chain around his neck. Ledbetter, a tough guy. But John Atkins with the chain around his neck, that's the toughest looking dude I've ever seen.
Jonathan Ledbetter looked plenty terrifying in a helmet and football pads down there on the field walking through with the chains.
So maybe it's bat, maybe it's chain. Is there another prop? You just have like a whole series of like props coming on the field. I'd be all for that. I have no problem with that whatsoever. James Crump says, after year 2 or year 3, they're not starting. He says quarterback's more of a quick trigger transfer. This is, I think, in conversation with somebody else. Against whoever does not start between Mathis and back, leave. We talked about this the other day with South Carolina, that Barton Simmons from 24/7 Sports, whom I like, was talking about how South Carolina's got this great succession plan when it comes to quarterback. And that's secession, not secession, because with South Carolina, you got to be specific. And I'm just not quite so sure that is going to work out quite as well as maybe it seems like it's going to on paper. First of all, there's a chance I think that Helinski beats out Bentley for the job this year. Well, if that happens, whoever they got committed for 2020 is not going to stick around. If Helinski is going to his second year in 2020 as the starting quarterback, I'm sorry, but you're not going to get a Carson Beck level prospect or somebody along those lines to come and do that job. So, everybody's dreaming of quarterback succession plans right now. I'm not quite so sure that's going to work out that way. The same thing, the classic succession plan would seem to be Oklahoma, which just had Baker Mayfield and just had Kyler Murray and going to have Jalen Hurts this year with Spencer Rattler following in behind that. I've told y'all before, this is another one of my kind of sure to be wrong hot takes. I think that Spencer Rattler beats out Jalen Hurts this season. And then after that, you're not exactly looking at, much of a succession plan, because, is someone going to want to follow in on a guy like Rattler who's going to have at least 2 more years of eligibility? So
even after watching Oklahoma's spring game, you still think Rattler's going to overtake Hurts?
I do. I'm not a Jalen Hurts believer, and that's the hill I'm going to die upon.
I mean, you're just trying to push every, starting quarterback out the door, so, par for the course. I'm sure you push Felipe Franks out for Emory Jones. You're going to push Bentley for Helinski, Jalen Hurts.
Wait, no, I didn't push Felipe Franks over Emory Jones. I mean, I was there last spring when Emory Jones couldn't play the position.
He looked decent in the reps he got against Georgia this year.
I guess. The point is,
you just want Felipe Franks to stay the quarterback for Florida because Georgia can beat them with him at quarterback.
That's the best case scenario for me. The point though here is I'll admit I don't really quite know what the future of quarterback succession plans look like. I mean, I think that scrambling and getting the best guy you can get may just be kind of par for the course in the future. I really do, and I think the one thing, and I've said this before, the one thing we really haven't seen yet is a happy quarterback in good standing in his program decide to leave for just a better offer, a better opportunity. We haven't seen that yet. Let me give you an example. This is not going to be a guy that I think transfers, but it's a guy that could transfer. By almost every estimation, Jarrett Garantano statistically had a really good year for Tennessee last year. And there's a chance he could have a statistically successful season this year too. But Tennessee's not going to be really good. They're just not. Does a guy like Garantano, or the future of a guy like that, good quarterback on bad team, does a guy like that say, hey, I'm clearly the quarterback and no one's going to challenge me for the starting job, but I think I could be a better quarterback on a better team, or just have a more fun year playing in a more competitive environment. That's, I think, the future of the transfer portal. And as I've said before, that's the moment when the favorability rating on the transfer portal among the people involved in college football goes down. Once the big programs start pilfering the smaller programs or the less successful programs for starters in good standing, that's when things are going to really change. And I'm not saying Garantano's not going to be the guy that does that, but it's an example of a pretty good quarterback on a pretty bad team. Maybe one day that guy's going to say, I can go be a pretty good quarterback on an even better team. It's just a more fun situation all the way around.
I'd just like to point out in the YouTube comment section in the past, 2 minutes, we've gotten questions about any Nolan Smith rumors and rumors about Brian Herrien entering the transfer portal.
Yeah, y'all got to be careful with this kind of stuff. I mean, as we said before, listen. I'm slightly hypocritical on this because last night I sat on my couch and watched all the Twitter stuff, but all the Florida rumors, kind of popping up, and nobody has more fun with that kind of stuff than I do. But not to be your dad for a second, but remember what I said the other day. The appetite for UGA football news never goes down, but the availability of UGA football news goes way down at certain times of the year. Now, what exists between that gap of people who want to hear news but the lack of actual news? The stuff that exists in that gap is the Wild West. So, sometimes the lack of a report is in itself a report, and you're going to hear rumors. You just are. The best way for some knucklehead with 1,100 Twitter followers to get 5,000 Twitter followers is to tweet something. Last night there was all this kind of stuff with Florida, and that may turn out to be true. I don't know, but there is a clear economic motivation to be the one to publish these rumors. There just is. There's absolutely an incentive to do that. So just be really, really careful with all of that.
Nolan Smith had a great, spring. Looked fantastic at Georgia. It looked fantastic and looked like, he was the best high school recruit in the country. Sort of validated some of that. Brian Herrien arguably had the best, spring game of any Georgia offensive player, in my opinion. He looked like a very, very capable SEC running back and someone who certainly looks like he's going to become a bigger part of the Georgia offense, both as a running back and as a pass catcher. So why you would, think that because, someone on Twitter published something, that they might be considering leaving or something like that, just hold on. And again, Brandon and I, DawgNation, we're a trusted news source. If we hear and know something
factual.
Well,
not me so much, but.
Me neither. I was trying to be facetious. But, if we hear something concrete and something we know we can go with, believe me, we're going to be talking about it.
And most of the time when you don't hear anything, that means there's nothing to hear. And most of the rumors you're going to hear this time of year are not really worthy of dignifying with a response. Memphis Dog, though, says he's heard that Eddie's entered the transfer portal. Listen, Eddie is very happy. We actually probably don't reference Eddie enough on the show anymore. But Eddie is very happy. He's a solid starter. He's a contributor. He's on track to graduate. Eddie's doing great right now. We're really happy with where he is at right now. Rob W says, "What's the Gator hater number at today?" How about 922? 922 for that right now. VTW and some folks, Blind Squirrel Sports, talking about George Pickens. Listen, I think that Pickens could be real fun for George. I can't wait to see him. I really can. I think he could be a lot of fun. You can go back and listen to those shows back in February when we were kind of talking about the possibility that Georgia might get him, then they thought they weren't going to get him, and then kind of surprisingly they do get him. That's really fun to look back on because I think when it's all said and done, that's going to be viewed as one of the bigger recruiting wins that Georgia got this 2019 class. G. Grace, who is an Alabama fan, says that Georgia's 1 year away if Fromm comes back. If the others would have stayed this year, I would say that UGA is the team to beat. I don't know about that, Grace, and I appreciate your response. I don't know that with Fromm as the quarterback in 2020 that Georgia's more of a threat to win the national championship. Obviously would help, but I think that Georgia kind of is what it is. As things stand right now, for the next few years, Georgia's going to probably be about where it is right now, in the mix with the Alabamas and the Clemsons of the world and whoever's else there for that college football playoff supremacy. They're going to be kind of right there in the mix with that. Nor do I think anyone who's left Georgia this year, with all due respect to McCole and Elijah and Isaac Nada, these guys who've chosen to leave the program, their decision to depart the program, I don't think it changes Georgia's national championship odds at all. In fact, I mean, tangibly, specifically, I don't think that it did. If you look right now, you see, Clemson about 2.5 to 1, Alabama about 3 to 1 to win the national championship. Georgia at some betting houses is about 7 to 1. If those four players that I just mentioned, Nada, Ridley, Hardman, Holyfield, if they were on the Georgia roster, is Georgia 4 to 1 to win the national championship? 5 to 1,
don't
they're
see
not.
If any of those guys are on the team, Georgia still doesn't have better odds than Alabama, and they still don't have better odds than Clemson.
So I think that what you're in an era of now is a lot of juniors are just going to choose to leave. The coaches, probably Kirby Smart included, definitely Nick Saban, he's been really outspoken about this, are going to tell these players, if you can't be a first-round pick or maybe a second-round pick, you shouldn't go. I don't think that's what players think anymore. And there are probably a lot of reasons why they do feel that way, and it's not for me to say one way or another if they're right or not. But I think that what happened with Georgia this year is going to be actually a little more common in the future, where if a guy says, if I can be on a roster and get paid, this is what I want to do. If I'm a late draft pick, or if I'm, in some cases, maybe not a draft pick at all, obviously that was Elijah Holyfield's story, if I'm on an active roster next year, it's still a better overall situation for me. I think that may be the new era, I think anyway, especially for certain positions, because certain positions are not going to get that top draft status necessarily. All right, what else we got?
Blind Squirrel Sports, talk a little baseball, keep it brief, but do you expect the Diamondbacks to make some noise in Omaha? Looking ahead, but I'd love to see them in the College World Series.
I would love to see it too, and I'll let you answer first.
Last night they dropped a game to Jacksonville State where they were literally a strike away from winning and ended up losing in extra innings. Emerson Hancock, he is going to pitch this weekend. That's big news for Georgia, even though, they swept Florida at home last week. I think you need Hancock to get that Friday win on the road against an SEC opponent in Auburn who's better than Florida is in baseball this year. The pitching's there, the starting pitching is there for a 3-game set when you can tout out Emerson Hancock, Tony Losey, CJ Smith, who, is battling a little bit of an injury right now, potentially Cole Wilcox, who looked really good against Florida coming out of the pen. Aaron Schunk is one of the best closers in baseball, and he's starting to get healthy now. When you have that kind of pitching, you're going to be in the game. The question with this Georgia team, and I think maybe the reason they might not make it to Omaha, is just can they continue to get those timely hits? Because they're not a great offensive team by any stretch of the measure, but they've been able to win a lot of games because when called upon, they've been able to get those key clutch hits. And is that a replicable formula in May and early June trying to get to Omaha?
I have kind of a weird take on Georgia baseball. For those of you who know the playoff format, you have the regional, which is a 4-team round-robin deal, the super regional, which is 2 teams and a best of 3, and then the College World Series, which is 8 teams whittled down to 2 and a best of 3 to determine the national champion. If Georgia can get to a super regional, I believe that Georgia has a better chance of winning a super regional than it does winning a regional. I'm not telling you Georgia's going to get knocked out in the regional round. That's not what I'm telling you. But the problem that I think that Georgia could have, we saw this last year with some of the teams like Duke that played in Athens. When you've got 4 teams coming to Foley Field, the chances of one of those teams getting hot offensively is just greater because you just got more, and it's actually 3 other teams besides Georgia. You just got another chance, 2 other chances for somebody getting hot bats at the right time. In a super regional, that's you versus one other team, and it's your pitching versus their pitching. And there are very few teams that I don't like Georgia in when it comes to that.
They shut down Vanderbilt's clearly a superior offensive team, and the Georgia pitching arm shut them down.
So in a team versus team situation, I like Georgia's pitching as much as anybody. Even with the loss last night, one of the RPIs that I saw recently had Georgia 5th in the country when it comes to RPI. This is a team that's done fine against a pretty good schedule. I like Georgia's pitching really, really fine. But baseball is a funky sport. It is really, really random. And if you bring in one of these teams to Foley Field and they just get hot bats over the course of a regional, that could be a tough tournament for Georgia to escape from, and that's, to me, the biggest concern there.
Now,
SEC tournament the same way. I don't believe that Georgia will win the SEC tournament.
Nor do I think they should make a significant effort to try and do so. Just given that pitching is their strength, and why try and wear out your arms when you know you're going to need those. They're right on the bubble in terms of hosting a super regional seed. I think they're in that like 6 to 10 range in terms of where they might end up being seeded. But if they win these last 2 series at Auburn this week, which will be tough given it's always hard to win on the road in the SEC. But then next week home against Alabama, they win both those series. They should feel very good about the chances of hosting both a regional and a super regional, which could be very big for their, potential success.
John Anthony on Facebook asked about Alex Huntley, the defensive lineman from out of South Carolina. I mean, I think to hear Jeff say it, that's one of the guys that Georgia's definitely in the mix with for sure. So that's a name I would definitely have circled. Who's his teammate? He has a high school teammate that I don't know that Georgia. That's the kid that was at G.
5-star defensive end.
Jordan Birch.
Birch.
Yeah. The Birch thing may be a stretch, but Huntley may be a pretty good chance for Georgia. That may be one of the guys they're interested in.
Georgia's, they're not in on Brzee, but they're still in on a lot of talented defensive linemen, guys who were, ranked a little bit higher. Huntley is, number 185 in the country. That's higher than a couple of Georgia defensive linemen they have now. Jay Hardy out of Tennessee is a guy we talked about. Jacoby Cowan is another guy we've talked about. Those are guys who were ranked, they're not top 50 5-star recruits, but they're still very, very good players who I think Georgia, should they land them, should feel very, very good about.
Lynn Johnson Shipman says, back to the idea of who busts through the banner to come on the field. I think whoever wears number 1 on their jersey should be the first one to bust through the field. It would have been Sony last year for what it's worth. I think that's a pretty good idea. I think the problem is Georgia's probably got like 17 guys wearing the number 1 these days. It seems like those single-digit numbers are always pretty well populated, but I do kind of like that idea. Whoever it is, I like the idea of it being a person that kind of give you a nice high vertical leap. You like the idea of kind of leaping your way through the sign, but I also like the idea of holding a bat as well. For those of you who know I'm a big pro wrestling fan, maybe the next iteration of this, because we've seen championship belts and things like that, the Georgia turnover spike shoulder pads kind of look like something from like the Road Warriors or something like that from pro wrestling. How about somebody come busting through the sign holding a steel chair? Can that be the next thing here? Can we get a steel chair prop? I know that's politically incorrect to celebrate big hits, but for like a big Lewis scene hit or something like that, can that guy get a steel chair? Are we still allowed to do that?
It's politically incorrect to celebrate illegal hits. Not big hits. There's a difference.
But can we still celebrate big hits? I'm not being funny.
We do. Fans still do.
Okay, I'm glad to know that.
Yeah, there's a difference between big hits and leading with your head trying to take someone else's head off. There's just a difference in that.
For sure. You
don't agree, but that's fine.
I do agree. I'm just looking at the comments.
It wasn't a wholehearted agreement.
That's because I was only halfway listening. I mean, I'm actually kind of glad to hear you say that because I don't want illegal hits. I don't want that at all. But do I think the football community in general has gone too far with some of this kind of stuff? I kind of do. That's probably a different conversation for a different time. Dipset also asking about Brenton Cox. I don't know where Brenton is right now. I mean, I'd like to see a big summer from Brenton because that's one of the guys that the same way I feel about Trayvon Walker now and some of these 2019 signees, you better believe I felt that way about Brenton Cox in 2018. I thought physically he might be the most impressive-looking player that Georgia signed for 2018. And just because you weren't necessarily getting a lot of G-Day love doesn't mean that you can't bounce back and have a big year. But I'd love to see him put the pedal on the metal in the summertime. I really would.
He's got an uphill battle ahead of him, given that guys like Nolan Smith, Jermaine Johnson, Azeez Ojulari all really impressed this spring. And, he's sort of fallen back a little bit. He wasn't on the black team, which was the first team defense. So, he's got him and Adam Anderson.
Is he definitely an outside linebacker?
He plays that sort of jack position where he's sort of a hybrid defensive end, outside linebacker mix. He's not sort of like the pure, what you think of, Von Miller type. He's a guy who could play both. He's actually one of the few guys who, based on his physical skill set, could actually play either a defensive end in a true 4-3 system or, potentially as an outside linebacker in a 3-4 system, which isn't true for guys, like an Adam Anderson or a Nolan Smith.
Who are certainly more true outside linebackers. Let's do 2 quick comments. We'll get out of here. Blind Squirrel Sports says, what about a Diamond Dogs in Omaha? How about a DawgNation Daily viewing party? I like the idea of doing that. He's even got a venue for us, the Roxy. That could be a lot of fun. I don't know that we could fill the Roxy for a baseball viewing party, but I do certainly appreciate that optimism. I think that's a great idea. Tommy Boy 2236 also says BA never listens to Connor. Listen, There's not a lot of things I do well.
He's not wrong.
But manning these comment sections while also trying to keep talking and listen to somebody else talk, that's probably not as easy as it looks sometimes. Anything else? Danny Blackman, the subject of graduate transfers. I'm assuming the only 2 grad transfers on the way to Georgia are the ones that are coming in here already. We know of Lawrence Cager and Eli Wolf, who ought to be getting pretty close to graduating by now, surely, right?
Yep, usually around this time of year. So they'll probably, when guys like Dominic Blaylock, Trayvon Walker show up later in the month of May, that's probably when they will arrive as well.
Chad Clark says 2-hour show today. Good job, guys. Yeah, this one is getting close to 2 because we started fairly close to on time, which we have been doing a lot more as of late. I hope that y'all will give me credit for that. All right, let's get ready to go. Fun stuff today with Rennie Curran and Candler Cook. Hope you'll check out his book, and we appreciate you being a part of this discussion with us. We'll do more recruiting stuff tomorrow on the program. Getting ready for DawgNation Days of Summer. Excited about that. I don't want y'all to miss it, though, so please go to DawgNation.com, find the link, register for your chance to win the giveaway, but also go ahead and reserve your room there, too, because this VIP thing before the big event at 6, the VIP thing is going to be really fun. I just want you to be a part of it. Plus, we're going to be playing golf and hanging out on the grounds. It's just going to be an awesome summer giveaway. I love summer. I like all that stuff, and we're going to do it with all of you there, starting at Callaway Gardens on June 13th and then at Brasstown on August 1st. So go to DawgNation.com for more on that. Also, huge thanks to R.S. Andrews for bringing the R.S. Andrews cool down to you. Air, heating, plumbing, electric. They do it all for us here at DawgNation. And if you've got a water heater that needs to be fixed or replaced, air conditioning unit, anything along those lines, rsandrews.com will take good care of it for you. All right, y'all have a great day. We'll see you back here again tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for another episode of DawgNation Daily Live. Have a great day, everybody.